Hi everyone, welcome back to this quick shop courtesy of Epicenter. Of course, obviously, please like us, tag us, follow us on all social media. This is Cristina with this quick shop part 2. Remember, we've already done part 1 of watercolors using water-based markers. Yes, water-based markers, and it was super quick. That quick shop was real quick. Today, we're gonna take our time and learn a little bit more about how to use those markers, how to make marks, which are very important in abstract drawing and painting, and how to dissolve that pigment into watercolors and to get that beautiful watercolor effect for some of these little drawings that we're going to draw today. So let's get started. All right, here we go. We're gonna get started. There's paper here, markers over here, just regular Crayola markers. We have a handful of brushes, a little bit of paper towel just because we might need to lift some of the watercolor off, and a little bit of water in a container to dissolve. I'm already calling them watercolors, but they are not. What this is a marker. It's water-based, which allow us to create this project if we don't have watercolors on hand. One of the first things I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna make a mark here, super saturated, which means that it has a lot of pigment in it. I'm gonna get my brush and I'm going to dip it in water, and then I'm going to dissolve the water pigment on it. And you can tell that it's a nice solid puddle of pigment, and I can grab this and create a bunch of little brush strokes. Super simple, super gentle, nothing fancy, nothing complex. If I have more water, I can make other marks with the same brush, right? And I can even go ahead and make some even lighter marks. So the thing here is when you have more water in your pigment, it will be lighter. As you can see, I'm dragging it over here. It will be lighter and lighter every time. As you see it here, it's a little bit on the dark tone. So let me start all over again. If we want a dark tone, we start with less water. And the more water you add to it, the lighter it will get. In here is mostly pigment, and mostly very little pigment, very little pigment and lots of water, lots of water. Even over here, a big puddle of water, and it's hardly any color here. Here's another thing that we can think about. Sometimes when we do watercolors, we put a puddle of clean water and then we bring in pigment onto it. It should be super light. Or we can bring a little bit of water again. You can probably barely see it. And we could also do this with a marker. Maybe make that a bigger puddle so we can see it better. So a bigger mark of water, if you will. Touch the marker, and there it is. There's a little bit of a watercolor effect. And we have all kinds of marks already to play with. We have a little bit of watercolor. We added the marker, and we added the water, and we diluted it, and we were able to utilize this color and create different marks, lots of them, by the way. Then I did it again, lots of marker, and diluted it all the way to its lightest color. So we have deep color, lots of it, a lot less because it has a lot of water. And then on some of these little puddles, maybe I should get this closer to you so you can see it again. If you have a puddle and you bring some of these pigments, this totally behaves like a watercolor right here. This is what watercolors do. I can even, if I want to, put it in this one that I started earlier. Put it in here also. You can color with the water-based marker onto that puddle of water. That also works. And then you can drag this color, right? Drag this color and create whatever effect you want to create, whatever shape you want to create. See, these two shapes touch, so now they have become one. This happens a lot in wet on wet watercolors. So let's get started with maybe a little project with something like this. For this next exercise, I'm going to use the orange color marker, and I'm just going to make some marks in here on the paper, and then later I'm going to add water to them to activate the water soluble tendency that this have. Actually, I'm going to change my brush to a bigger one. Just a little bit of water. And then drag the brush over it. Which, what I tell my students is you wake up the watercolors. Now, I should tell you as I do this little exercise that if you attempt to do this with alcohol-based markers, permanent markers, such as your Sharpies and all of those, this is not going to happen because, well, they are meant to dry super fast and you're not going to be able to play at this. I can also grab and pull some of these pigments a little bit lower. See, I can really extend the life or the color actually all the way down. It's so magical that we are able to use some of these markers. And another thing that I would want to mention is that the markers that I'm using are relatively brand new, so they do have a lot of pigment in them. Let's experiment with markers that have had tremendous amount of use. Like if they're drying up, as you can tell here, they're super intense in color because they're brand new. But if they start to dry up, sometimes we dip them in water and we make marks over it with them. That's another way to do it. So notice how I'm just gently creating this pattern, this awesome pattern, and I'm gonna let it dry. Here's one thing that we should talk about. Like, let's say that we're working and we like what we have, and then suddenly there's a little puddle here. Like there's this thing that I don't want, and you're like, whoopsies, this I did not want. And what do? Then you pick up your paper towel, dab it, and then it goes away. Like I can dab this one. If it's still in there, you dip your paper towel in water and then gently try to kind of clean and erase that mark there. And it's going to be super minimal. So that's one way to remove some of the marks that you might not want. So we're going to let this dry and we're going to come back with another color on top. On the meantime, see, so one of the things you need to do is carry it gently onto another surface. And then we get another piece of paper. Why don't we do something a little bit more wild? So this time you get to draw. One more maybe? Two more maybe? And then once I get going, I can't stop. So we have this little pattern here. Again, dip your brush in the water. And then let's just wake up the watercolors. And we can leave them as a circle. Look how cool this is. Of course you don't have to follow a full circle. You can just let it do its magic because it will try to spread out. The watercolor effect comes from the pigment in the markers and it's trying to spread out with the touch of the water. So here we go, look at that. Super cool, super awesome, super fun, and super quick thanks to this Quickshop, right? Look at that. And I have a bunch of swirls. Of course, since I have pigment in my brush, I have some of these marker paint in my brush, or I can pick up some from some of these areas. I can fill in some of the empty shapes like that. You can see there's a lot in here, so we can get some of that. Bring it over. One of the things that I should also tell you is that it's important for you not to drag the brush too much on top of the surface. And perhaps I should do that on another piece of paper so you can see what happens. Let me move this out of the way so it will dry. I'll show you on this paper that for part one of the watercolors. So let's say that I'm going to, see, I have one big dot of red. And then I'm gonna put water in here. And if you have the tendency to go over it too many times, I'm gonna let you see what happens here. Hopefully you'll be able to see what's going on here. You are now ripping the paper. Look at all this, looks like wet toilet paper. All of this here is a no-no. Please know that. This is not okay. This means you went too far. Moving the color around, you're also compromising the brush. The brush is not gonna love it, by the way. So if you get all these little bubbles of material on top of your paper, that means you are ripping away some of the layers on the paper. And so this is not a good indication. So that means you went too far. Don't do this. For watercolors, even if it's watercolor paper, you want to be gentle. You want to be gentle. And generally, these brushes that I'm using are multi-use. You want to use watercolor brushes. See, because they're soft. They're like makeup brushes. If you're going to use makeup brushes, of course, I hope they're yours, not your grown-ups. Then you're going to get in trouble. So here we go. Just gentle like that. If you put a clean bubble or puddle of water and put watercolor, the marker on top of it, it's gonna activate and it's gonna become watercolor like, even though they're not. And I'm telling you, this is very much like watercolors. Trust me when I tell you this. These puddles, all these other marks that have dried from the previous project, totally look like watercolors. Remember, don't go too far. And when you have something in here that you don't like, you can always clean it up, dab, dab, dab with the paper towel. Just a tiny paper towel. Don't compromise your entire paper products. Look at that, nice and clean. This one, it's not quite dry, but we can work on it. I'm sure we can work on it. Let's do its complementary color, which is blue. I'm just gonna activate some marks like this. I'm going on the fast. I remember that from last video. I go a little too fast. And then I'm gonna wake up these colors, just a little bit of water on top. Notice that the brush holds enough water for me to go over several marks in one go. Like I don't need a lot of it to activate this. When I put the mark down, it looks like a marker, like it was done with a marker. Once I come over with water, I can dissolve some of those edges, some of those rough edges, and then they become a little more soft and watercolor-like. What happens here is that I chose my favorite set of complementary colors. Blue and orange are complementary to each other. And then I also wanted you to see that when you mix orange and blue, you should get a brown color, but it's not giving us the brown color. It's just giving us another more yellowish brown. Enough for mark making. We got to discover what happens if you go too far on the paper. We don't want this to happen. We did this little exploration with swirls. It's drying, it's looking awesome. And then the first project was to really study and investigate how to make marks of different types. Notice how as it dries, it will look like a watercolor project. So go at it with your water-based Crayola markers and a set of brushes, a little bit of water, and then you're in for lots and lots of fun. And there you have it on this quick shop, which was not as quick as the other ones that I presented to you. But anyways, we have this one set of swirls. We get to decide which way you want to present it. It's still drying, as you can tell. It totally looks like a watercolor project. So I hope you get to investigate and play with this idea of watercolors using water-soluble markers, which means that they are water-based. So when you go to the store, just make sure it says water-based or like, you know, easy clean off or whatever. Please, again, follow us, like us on social media, and let us know how it goes. Show us your projects. And until next time, thank you so much. Bye-bye.